Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to see the participants trickling into the webinar. I already see the number going up. So welcome, everybody, wherever in the world you are. One of our favorite little intros to do as we're getting warmed up to start the webinar is to use the chat to share where in the world you are right now. It just gives everybody a good idea of like what kind of a global community we've amassed for this webinar today. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of an overview of what we want to accomplish today, what we're going to cover, and how the webinar is going to run, and then we're going to jump into it with not too much fanfare. So here's the deal: we're going to have about the first 30 minutes or so. Tim, Colin, and I are going to be talking about support and sales, how to align those two teams, how to make sure that they work better together and produce better outcomes for companies, and why alignment between support and success is incredibly important and almost always overlooked. I'm impressed by every single one of you showing up today and being interested and wanting to invest in improving this, because it's not the hottest topic. Doesn't have chatbot, AI, or cryptocurrency in the title of the webinar. So you people are our people. You're people that really care about the customer, really care about building a great business and delivering a great service to the customer. So we're going to cover some topics on the things that we have done and we've seen that lead to success in aligning success or support and sales. And then the second half of the webinar, the last 30 minutes, it's going to be your questions. So it's going to be Q&A time. You're going to be leading and driving the conversation and making sure that we answer the questions and we give the advice that you need in your team, in your company, right? As I've told to many webinar participants before, this is going to be as valuable as you are proactive, right? We're going to try to do our best in the first half to give you things we think are important to know, but you're going to get as much ROI out of this webinar the more you participate, the more you ask questions, the more you engage. Now, a lot of people love to use the chat window to ask questions, but that's not the best place because lots of chatter is going to be going on in chat, and 30 minutes in, there's not going to be any way for us to scroll back and pick and choose what are questions and what are comments. There's a little button in Zoom called Q&A. If you click that button, you can write your question and it's never going to disappear. It's the right place to ask your question. So please, at any time as we speak, the first 30 minutes of the webinar, you have a question, click the Q&A button, write it in there. You can have multiple questions. And then during the second half of the webinar, we're going to go through those and answer as many as we can, and we're going to aim to answer every single one of them. All right, that's enough of my spiel. Let's do a quick intro round, and then we're going to launch into the webinar, the actual meat and potatoes of it. First of all, I'm going to introduce Ryan. That's the one still really attractive image, the one person here that's not streaming video. The reason why it doesn't do this, earlier I had people asking me, why didn't you guys allow Ryan to speak or stream video? You guys are really mean. We're not really. Ryan is the mastermind behind the webinar. Serious, he's coordinated everything. He put the content together. He's managing everything in the back end, but he's not really participating on the panel. That's why you just see his image. But he's going to be really active in chat, coordinating with you. So that's Ryan. Let's go actually with the person next to him on this and start with you, Tim. Maybe just a few words on who you are, what company you're with, and why you particularly care or are passionate about support and sales, why this topic is something that's close to your heart. Give us a quick intro.
Perfect. Thanks, Silly. Yeah, so my name's Tim Thine. I lead the sales team here at Help Scout. We're a customer support platform. So we have one part of the platform is our help desk and ticketing. One part is live chat and a self-service tool. And then one part is your help documentation. And as you can imagine, as a provider of customer support software, the alignment between sales and support is near and dear to our heart. And something that was something we really put attention to really early on when building the sales team here to make sure that we were aligned, because this is something our customers need help with.
Dope. Yeah, I couldn't think of somebody better than somebody who's running sales at a support ticketing software company, right? Yeah, so you're going to have a lot of unique insights. That's super, super dope. Colin, you're next.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Very good.
Awesome. I'm coming in from, I hijacked the Seeking Wisdom office at Drift because I'm in Boston this week. So DG and DC were kind enough to let me, I'm in the podcast room. So I got a little thank you there. But I'm Colin Stewart. co-founder, co-CEO of Predictable Revenue. We help companies build outbound sales teams. We help them build the teams, and sometimes we actually are the team for them. Why I'm here, I believe that support, product, sales is all really part of the product, right? And coming from a guy who spent most of my life in sales, without the other half of the support and everybody else that has to come through to execute post sale, that they're the real heroes that give people in the sales roles the confidence that we're selling something amazing, right? They give us the great reputation that creates that virtuous cycle that makes it easier for us to go out and sell more and to have happy customers, because it's impossible to sell the close to market if nobody's loving what you're doing. So that's why I'm here. That's why this is so important. How about you, Stelly?
Awesome. So thank you. That was very smooth, Colin. Most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur, and I've been selling as an entrepreneur, right? So I've run a lot of sales teams. I have a lot of sales people, and people know me definitely as being like a sales dude, right? Or a sales founder that can give advice for startups and how to figure out things around the sales side of things. But, I think I think I really came to appreciate the importance of support and what I call team customer alignment, right? Anybody, actually, the entire company should be seeing themselves as one team. But if we really want to make this more practical, even if we take out the product team and we just think about marketing, sales, success, and support, that is the life cycle of the customer journey, right? Those are not separate teams that do completely different things. Those are teams that are throwing themselves the ball all the way to hopefully an incredible experience for the customer and tons of value for the customer. So I think I understood that a lot better when we started Close, and the first year or so, it was the three founders doing all the support. And then for the next year or so, one of the co-founders, who was way overqualified, was doing full-time support, 8 hours a day. And then when we started to hire support people, one thing that was really important to us, and when we started building the support team, was to say, we want to give our customers the type of support that we want to get. And most of the support that we're getting for all the SaaS products that we use is terrible, right? It's a clear afterthought, and it's not really excellent. People that just repeat what you said in very nice terms and throw the ball back to you, giving you some very basic answers. Is the laptop plugged? Have you started and restarted the app again? And this stuff is fine, right? But when you talk to sophisticated customers, that's a very frustrating experience all the way to what you really need to get resolved. So we started building a very strong support team, and we saw an incredible benefit and value to the overall business and our customers. And we started investing a lot in having a support team that has a high sales IQ and a sales team that has a high support IQ, right? And we're probably going to touch on both of these. So seeing the impact that this had in my business just made it a much more important topic to me than I realized. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known. So I'm super psyched to be talking to you two about this topic, and to have like a really cool group of people all around the world that wanted to join, want to probably ask questions. I already see a few questions, flowing into the Q&A queue. So really unpack this and share more of it, and spread the good word of support and sales alignment. All right. So to kick things off, Tim, I'm going to start with you. What I always love to start with is the basic question of what drives you crazy that companies and startups do today when it comes to the way that their support and sales teams work, or work together, or work against each other. That probably is easy to resolve, but you still see it rampant everywhere. Like, just one pet peeve, one thing that you think is an easy problem to solve, or easy misalignment to readjust, that many companies just miss out on.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer in kind of two ways. I think you already touched on the first thing that drives me crazy, is they think of them as different functions. And although they are different functions in the business, you always hear people talking about sales and support as totally different functions. And I think you forget they're two sides of the same coin, right? They're both focused on the customer experience. And in a lot of cases, say in SaaS, they're actually, historically, they focused on different ends of the life cycle. Sales was bringing people on board. Support was post-sale. You're seeing more and more that those roles are blended. Sales are still helping post-sale, and support is helping pre-sale. So I think that's one of the things that really drives me crazy, is people kind of thinking of the two separately. And then I think the kind of the really tactical one, though, is given that they think of them separately, they train them separately, right? So I think that's probably one of the biggest things is you have sales training, you have support training, and you don't have a hybrid training for both. And I think it's just a missed opportunity because at the end of the day, the foundational knowledge of both of the teams is the exact same. So by training them together, you're not only building that foundation, but you're doing it together as a team. So you're building that collaboration really early on.
Dope. Colin, what do you think?
I think communication is the biggest one that frustrates me is when you go through, like, I come from a solution sales background. So I like to get deep and really understand, the challenger, mentality of you're having these great conversations where, you feel like you're talking to somebody who's an expert who could be a consultant on this, but chooses to work for this company because they believe in the product and believe in the value that it can create. And their job with onboarding you as a customer is to help understand how our product or service can create that value for you. And it's challenging when you have these like great sales conversations. You're so fired up about this is what we're going to achieve with the product. And then it's just sort of tossed over the fence. And it's just such a momentum killer where you've built up this great rapport with the company. You think they're amazing. And then that sort of stops. And maybe there's an email intro, or maybe the rep comes onto the first call and says, hey, here's who your people are. Right. But that's pretty rare. It's pretty frequently from what we've seen. It's definitely not everybody, but it's okay. You're closed. Now let me intro you to the support team, or the support team will reach out, and then you're just sort of sitting there and you're hanging. And it's that moment after you've made that buy where you're so fired up and you're just ready for like, okay, here comes the value. And then it's just crickets, right? And it's the gap between the sort of expectation and what you actually get with the support team or the execution team or ops team kicking in. That's, I think, one of the biggest things that we want to make sure that we're good at internally, and we still have lots of work to do. And one of the things that we've seen with products that we've purchased recently.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing in different ways, right? But for me, it's a similar thing with a different flavor or a different perspective of it, in the sense that the division, like the moment I see myself as like I'm group A and you're group B, and I'm trying to get good performance for group A, and I think about myself as like a silo where it's like, if we do all the tickets, then we're winning, right? And the sales team is thinking, if we're closing all the deals, then we're winning. But it's like, well, not necessarily, right? If you are closing all the deals and you're closing a ton of deals that can't be supported because what the customer really needs is not easy to do with your product, it will create a ton of support headaches. And then if the support team is like, well, we're just telling the customer this can't be done, right? Ticket closed, right? The ticket queue is empty. We went through this really, really quickly with like a fast turnaround time on answering support tickets.
Yeah.
As if that's the end of the problem. Then both teams are killing it, but the company is tanking, right? And I think that just realizing we're the same fucking team. Like, we're one company, we're working together here. And we need sales to do a fantastic job. We need ourselves to do we need to work really closely together to do a good job for the customer. There is no, it's sales' fault or it's support's fault, right? It's like, and I think that the finger pointing is the end result of what started by thinking about both functions or both teams as completely separate. And then you think about them separately, you set separate KPIs, you have them in separate places in the office, right? You're just like, you're in office A and you're in office B, like be far away from each other and never spend time together.
Yeah,
don't talk to each other.
Don't even look at support. Don't even look at it.
No, it's a waste of time. And then these teams have nothing to do with each other. And obviously, of course, they feel really foreign. It's very easy to blame somebody or dislike somebody you don't know, right? So I think thinking about these two things as one, making sure that sales and support actually interact, making sure that they're socially interacting, right? One thing that we do at our team retreats is that we have planned lunches, and at lunch we bring certain groups together. It's not voluntary, because if you allow people to, if you have the big room and you're like, just have lunch, everybody's going to have lunch with the group they already know, right? With the people they know really well within the company. So we don't give people that freedom most of the days at lunch. At breakfast, everybody can do what they want. Dinner and lunch, we actually schedule where you're going to sit with whom and what you're going to talk about. And so we're going to have like a lunch where it's sales and support. And we're going to put these two groups together and sit them down and have them spend an hour together, right? And get to know each other. And we might even prepare certain cards if the conversation is not organic, where it's like, people get conversation starters, what questions to ask each other, and how to personally get to know each other and start to realize those are human beings, right? They might be in sales, but they're not all evil liars, right? At all times, those are all just normal people. And the salespeople might realize these support people are also really good people that really try to do a good job and don't hate money, right? And so if you start liking each other, it's much easier to work together. If you start understanding each other, much easier to work well together. So I think you're
totally right on the empathy piece, right? If you lack that empathy between the two groups, it's so easy to put up these barriers and say, "Oh, fuck it, it's not my problem. That's support." Or "Fuck it, these salespeople just keep closing crappy deals. Screw them. You don't understand the context. You don't empathize for the, what either side is going through with their KPIs, with their, the goals, what they're trying to achieve, what they were hired to do. Because a lot of the time it's just, that there's natural friction built into the company." I had a question for you. I know this is your webinar, but these sound like amazing things that you're doing at Close. Who's responsible? Like, who takes care of that? Is that something that you do? Is that the managers of each of the departments? What does that look like at Close?
So it depends. So when it comes to, one thing that we did, I think, organizationally, is that we have sales, success, and support is led under one leadership, and it's kind of team revenue, right? That's the way that we coined it. And you could also coin it a team customer, whatever you want. But so the person that is leading the entire group is not just leading sales and marketing or sales and success, but also leads support. And that makes a really big difference. If these three teams are led under the same leadership, they feel like they're part of one group. When it comes to the social interactions, right? When it comes to that stuff, in our case, a lot of that happens in the 2 yearly retreats that we do, where we fly in everybody for 1 week in a new city. And that is a week that's not very casual anymore, right? It started with just like 4 people and we would just travel together and work. But once you're like close to, once you're over 30, you can't just be like, and there's people from 13 different countries and from an age group of like, from all age groups, from all lifestyles. You can't just be like, here, just work next to each other and good things are going to happen. So we have learned to design those retreats very carefully. It's like a separate product in the company. And I spend a lot of time designing those weeks because those weeks are strategically so important. Like, we make a lot of big decisions during those weeks. A lot of things happen that are more strategic. And then the 4 or 5 months between the retreats are more execution. Like, all the things we decided on, we are fully aligned as a company. We know where we need to go next. And now everybody can go back to their home, wherever it is, and just execute. So these weeks are so important that I spend a lot of time kind of designing and planning for it. And we have a Mary, head of culture, and she works really closely on that with me. And we try to really think through, how do we make sure that there's nobody in the company that has never interacted with somebody else in the company. So we put together different groups and different people in ways that they can socially interact and pollinate. And we look at the problems that have come up or the misalignment that happens naturally over the 5 months that we weren't together. And we're like, where are the biggest misalignments and who do we have to put in what room with whom, with what kind of a framework to get everybody back on like a single focus and a single goal, making sure that we adjust it for the friction. So the team retreats are a really big tool. And we do like things like sales training for the new for all the new hires. And we'll have, like, in the early days, we had engineers training them on sales calls and teaching them objection management, all kinds of stuff they really didn't want to learn, right? To increase their sales IQ, to build a better product for salespeople that they're servicing. So those are some of the things that come to mind. But I think also a big important thing was that we started doing support for a really long time ourselves. And one of my co-founders was leading support as the only support person. And then he hired the first 2 support people and was leading the support team as the head of support for, 4 years or so out of the 5 years of existence, right? So it always had somebody really senior that cared for it and was invested in it. So I think that made a really big difference. We didn't just hire some junior person to do support, and then it was always this group that developed kind of alongside everything else.
Gotcha. So support's always had a seat at the table and has been part of that chief customer officer, chief revenue officer sort of type of role.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, and to the point of kind of goals and KPIs, I think one thing to think about is when you have all the teams aligned, like you have company goals and then you have your team KPIs, but I think it's important to remember that although there's your individual performance you're measured against, right? So for sales, you're looking at what's your win rate, time to connect, revenue, velocity, right? And sales is looking at, right, resolution time, first response time, what their customer happiness score is. At the end of the day, those are all just the little details that we're measuring in the day-to-day and month-to-month. But there's all the big goals that really everyone is rowing in the same direction to. What is the customer health? And there's two flavors to that, right? New customers coming in, we're here in business. What are the new customers? Are we retaining and growing existing accounts? And what is our product adoption and NPS? And if all of the teams are designed, at the end of the day, all of those KPIs are rowing toward those big metrics that both teams should be aligned around.
Yeah, and I think like Stelly said, it starts, you can really feel it in an organization when you have sales over here and support over here and marketing here, rolling up to 3 different executives, right? When you have, like you said, Tim, everybody rowing in the same direction with the same KPIs with one senior leader that they all roll up to, you can feel the difference as a customer.
Yeah, and I think, we have an interesting history here. So what's funny is support was a team 3-4 years before sales was a team. We didn't have a sales team. So it's funny, coming into the org and building our sales group, for lack of a better term, we were anti-sales. Like everyone was hard no to doing sales. And I said, we've been doing sales forever. Like this isn't new. But what's funny is our support team was doing the selling. They just didn't know it. And I was like, at the end of the day, we're just formalizing it. We're not really doing anything all that different. We're just helping customers. We're answering questions. We're providing value up front. The same way you're doing it today, we're just doing it in a more proactive lens. I would say for building empathy, so given there was probably a lot of friction there, right? Sales is coming in, it's newer. Something that we still do to this day, everyone at the company does, but sales is hyper-focused, is we have to build empathy up front in 2 ways. One, we have to build empathy. In our case, similar to your stories, we need our sales reps to understand what it's like in the day-to-day of a support person, given what we're selling. But the other part is we need our support team to feel, not just get to know them socially, but actually feel confident. One of the big problems for us is, I'm like, why is there so much friction? It's like, they're not product experts. And I was like, maybe they are, but I realized, we actually have to give support the confidence that we understand the product, the little nuances, ins and outs. So all of our sales reps actually do whole company support on an ongoing basis. And they actually spend their first 2 weeks with the company full-time in the support queue. So they go through training as a support person, and then they actually spend, I think it's about 10 days full-time as a support rep at the company to get to know the software, but also our customer base.
That's phenomenal, Tim. We do something similar. It's a bit challenging for us because our support team is sort of combined with our account management team. We call them account strategists, and they're this really strange hybrid that I won't go into, a topic for a different webinar. But we actually try and pull account executives out of that support team because they know the product so well. And like what I was talking about earlier, we were talking about the challenger sale, solution sale, and really wanting to be that expert, right? How better to be able to support future potential customers by having all of this experience of using the product, making customers successful. I listened to our account, one of our account execs that we just pulled out of that team, and he'll be on a call and a customer's like, well, how about this scenario or how about that scenario? He's like, I've done that. I had a customer like this. You can check out the case study that's there, and it's such a broad breadth and depth of knowledge that he can go on any topic that, when we're looking at, okay, well, how do we scale that up? If we want to hire 30 salespeople, it's going to be a challenging piece. And so I like that you're getting people in the first 10 days, you have them start there and then sort of graduate to, because for us, he spent a year and a half on that team, and then we pulled them out. So maybe that's another solution, is just huge support team, and then get a couple of people that are have their eyes set on sales and pull them out strategically.
So here's what we're going to do next. Usually we would have another 6 minutes of me just driving the conversation, but I'm always peeking at what kind of questions people are asking in the Q&A app. And there's just too many really, really good questions and some of them that are not that straightforward to answer with a yes or no. So I feel like we should, in order to have a chance to answer the question, I would jump right into the Q&A right now. And for everybody who's listening, keep the questions coming. This is really, we've done a lot of these webinars, and the quality of questions here is really high. Probably the type of person, again, the type of awesome person that wanted to be in a webinar like this. This explains why the quality of questions is really specific, really, really strong. So let's start with the first question here. How how do sales and support teams collaborate in different situations like account expansion, mitigating customer churn, etc.? So I'm assuming the idea here is, okay, you have a customer, and now the question is, upselling them to a higher tier plan, making sure they add more seats, making sure they sign a contract, or when they're leaving, or when they're churning, or when they're canceling, or when they're downgrading. Who's responsible? Should it be sales? Should it be support? What's the right solution there? Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think I'd say this is an ongoing improvement, right? So I think the first thing that we had to do was, one, make sure our systems are integrated. So we use Help Scout for support, Salesforce for sales, make sure that they're tightly integrated. So we had both teams on the same page looking at the same information. And then step two is just setting clear guidelines. So for us, it's a little unique, and I'll try to explain it clearly. So our support team is not viewed as a cost center. They're actually a growth, like they're part of the growth team. And they're measured on not just resolution time, but also growth of certain accounts as well. So we just had clear guidelines for our team that says who should handle what and how do we mitigate it. So if you're under, a certain size or certain qualification criteria, and you write in and it's a churn risk, renewal, expansion opportunity, somebody on what we would call our support-driven growth team would work with you in a hands-on capacity to work through that problem, to learn more. And then if you are over the specific qualification criteria, or you had an assigned account manager or account executive, you would work with them in a one-to-one capacity. Now, that's not always a clear, so I think the clearance is it's not always a clear divide that's like, this is your problem or this is your opportunity and vice versa. It's about collaborating. So by having the right information on, to give you a scenario, would be, hey, Tim, this account you worked with 12 months ago just wrote back in. They're looking to add 50 additional team members. Do you want us to take this and help them out, or do you prefer, because you have the context of the account, do you prefer to work with them? And making sure that there's open lines of communication there has worked really successfully for us.
So, Colin, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of what Tim said. I think I'll stress that how important it is to have those boundaries sort of drawn out ahead of time, and recognizing that these are artificial lines that don't really mean anything, and what's best is to find the right solution for the customer, because we'll have people cross them all the time because they've got a strong relationship here, or they might need a little extra support there, and we sort of leave it on the team members themselves. We empower them to make that call of, hey, I feel like I have this one, or I don't. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, sort of defining, this is what we're trying to solve for the customer. This is who we think is best equipped to solve it. And then the third piece is just building the empathy between teams so that they trust that the other side is taking on, the areas of responsibility and the tasks and the types of customers that they're comfortable making successful, and that they know what their limits are in terms of, okay, they're thinking about going from 10 seats to 1,000 seats. I probably need to bring somebody in. And I feel like what Steli alluded to, or talked about, is having that empathy between the two teams builds that trust and makes it a little bit more free flowing between the two departments.
Yeah, and I just add that this is actually your opportunity to build that. So this is the common case where sometimes it's actually not best to just take ownership and say, yep, I'll do that, or you can do that. It's actually an opportunity for, if somebody asks us, we're not going to say, oh yeah, we'll take it. What we're going to say is, actually, I think I could be helpful here. There's a lot of context to this account. Let's jump on a call together with them. That way we can work together on the solution, because I might need your help. And it's actually a good learning opportunity. Oftentimes, if we don't know the answer, we're going to learn it from support. And then support has a new appreciation for, wow, having all this context provides a more meaningful or impactful outcome for the customer.
Sweet. All right. Next question that I have here is, some of these questions are similar in terms of on a very high level, although they go specifically into different areas, right? So we'll try to address this one quick and see if somebody has a strong thought on specific process. The question is basically, how do you divide the lines here between where sales should engage and support should engage, specifically on social platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter? People are talking about your company. I assume people are asking questions around your company. When does support take over versus sales, and how do who's responsible for what? I'll chime in and say my 2 cents and see if somebody, one of you guys wants to add something to that. But again, I would say that in general, it depends on who your customer is and how they're active on those different platforms. And it depends on what kind of interaction those are, right? So if you find that a lot of people come to your Facebook page to ask support typey questions, then the support team can be monitoring that, and can, there's a lot of support ticketing systems that integrate with all these different social media platforms. But again, you give the support team, you hope that the support team has the training and the empathy and the culture to recognize sales opportunities, right? It doesn't depend. It doesn't matter if it's in their desk ticketing system or on Twitter. And it doesn't matter if it's a customer or not, right? A customer could come with a specific question that makes you realize, if you have enough sales context, this is actually a great opportunity for the sales team to re-engage with this customer, because there's a big opportunity to upsell or to expand on what we're doing. Or it could be that somebody asks a question that isn't a customer yet, right? It's a very specific, very technical question. I'm on a trial. I clicked this button. It didn't do this. How do I do it? Now, as a support person, again, I could just answer that question. It's clearly a support question, right? Or I could recognize, especially if I have the system set up so that support and sales systems talk to each other and the data is shared. This is a trial on the third day, asking a question about, something that leads me to that is a leading indicator that this is a really engaged trial lead and should get more attention and love and care from the sales team, right? So knowing these things, I think, matter, but saying Twitter is always support, LinkedIn is always sales, and like that doesn't work. It really depends on how customers and how users or potential leads, how they interact on these platforms with you typically, and who would be the best team to, in general, be on the front lines, and then either taking those requests or passing them on to the right departments and the right teams in the company. All right, if you guys agree, let's go to the next question. And the questions keep rolling in, right? So we're gonna have to work hard here to get through all of them. All right, next question is a nice one, and I'll tweak it a little bit. The original question, just to be fair, was about finger pointing, right? So Ben asked, hey, we have a lot of finger pointing and blaming going on between our support and sales team. Like, basically the support team is saying that the sales team is closing tons of bad deals and are doing a terrible job. The sales team is saying that the support team is dumb, right? Or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on. How do we fix this? How do I fix this? These teams already exist. I might even add, I think one important twist is the twist that maybe this is not day one, so you can just build a great culture and all that. You already have some of that structure in place. What can you do as a team member, not necessarily as the founder of the company or the CEO or something? What can you do as a team member of support or sales to help these two worlds work better and do less finger blaming?
Yeah, so
I can take this first.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So I think the first thing is this is really where it's time for the leaders on the team to step in and help. And I think the first thing, like, this is the toxic behavior you never want to see. But I think the first thing is being really open-ended, right? If support was unhappy with a customer that we just brought on, or we were unhappy with the way they were answering questions to an open opportunity we were working, or they didn't loop us in, I think the best thing to do is get everyone in a room, right? This is basic conflict management. I think immediately, and if you do it over and over enough, you'll realize that most of the time, sometimes they're valid concerns, and you have to answer honestly and own up to, we could have done this better, maybe this was a bad deal, and just fall on that sword, but make sure you take the actions to prevent it. But I think more often than not, when we've had these situations, it's typically just misalignment on one side, or often it's one team making an assumption about something, and by just talking it out together, it's almost immediately resolved. And we come to kind of a mutual understanding and kind of we move forward. And I'd say there was a period of time as we started to kind of grow the sales team, we saw that happening more and more, and we just kept addressing it hands-on every time. And it's actually just not, now we're never even brought into it. Typically, if support has a problem with something, they're just going to tell the sales rep, or vice versa, and they're going to talk through it on their own. And those don't really creep out. But I think be proactive and really dig into the details that don't run from them.
I'll build on that really quickly, because I think it's great to have a supporting, management team. I'll take a different tack. If you're an individual contributor and you're struggling with this, and there's lots of finger pointing going back and forth between you and the other side, no matter what side you're on, I think I like the approach of just, okay, let's assume that I'm wrong. Because anytime when there's heated, arguments and disagreements within a company, people are like, it's usually not somebody's 100% right and somebody's 100% wrong. There's usually an element, it sort of exists on a scale. And so, okay, let's go in and ask this person, okay, what am I doing wrong? What could I have done better? And by starting with assuming and taking some of the onus on, hey, this is something that I've been a part of, and and being open to, I've made some, I've contributed to the problem here. I'm taking some of the onus. It almost disarms the situation. You'll find that they'll start to relax, and you're saying, oh, this was my fault. I agree, blah, 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 blah. You're still going to get some jerks that are going to just like steamroll you, and they're just having a bad day. And sometimes, we have to work with those people. I think the large amount of people are not that way. From my experience, if you lead off with empathy and understanding and admitting that, hey, I'm not perfect, I contributed to this problem. Let's try and work through this. I think what you'll get is them saying, oh, you know what? No, I contributed as well. It wasn't just you. And then by starting it off that way, instead of just battling, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, it makes for, you get to a productive conversation so much faster.
Love it. All right, Colin, I'll stay with you. The next question here is, how should the support team work with the challenge of having a sales team that is selling features that have not been developed yet? He's like, it basically leaves us as the bearers of bad news, right? The customer or the new customer has a certain expectation that then when they can't find it or it doesn't match the reality, they ping support, and then we have to be the ones that tell them all these unpleasant things. Like, how do we deal with this as a support team? How do we deal with a sales team that is aggressively selling things that don't exist yet?
Question for you first. Did my support team ask you to ask me this question?
It's anonymous, so I would say the chance is high. I don't know.
It certainly is something that I have done. I was our first salesperson up until we got to $1 million ARR, and I've been guilty of this more than anybody. I think it has to come from the top of the sales team, right? And really, the way I see it, sales, marketing, product, support, they really all are part of the same function. And a lot of people disagree with me on the product piece, but really product is the sort of that tip of the spear, right? They're trying to understand what is this market opportunity and how do we solve that? And I feel like the communication between product and sales needs to be crisp, needs to be tight, and they need to be giving them the sort of battle cards and that market understanding of, here's the problem that our product solves and why, right? And where I think people, and sometimes salespeople just get excited, and some people, you hear about something that they're working on, but I feel like the communication between product and sales needs to be really buttoned down in terms of, here's what you can share with a customer right now, here's what you should not share. And the more I've learned about product, the less I want to share about that. The more I learn to not share the upcoming roadmap with customers, because that roadmap is, it's on the whiteboard, but the transition, the journey from being on the whiteboard to being in front of a customer can be, in some cases, a couple hours if it's a quick bug fix, or it could look exactly like that quick bug fix in my head, but it's actually going to take 3 months. And I think education of the sales team on this is how long it takes to actually build a feature. This is the term. This is like what we can share with the customer. This is what we can share. Because sales is all about setting expectations. And if you're setting the wrong expectations with the customers, you're selling built-in churn, right? You're not doing your job as a salesperson to sell the full product. You're selling 140% of the product because you're selling what exists today and then 40% of the future. Right. And I think that's where you can really get in trouble. So I think as a support team, have some understanding for what the sales team is going through. But also I think if you're the leader of that support team, you need to have conversations with the product team in terms of what we're sharing and how we communicate with the sales team. Because sometimes it's not, they're not doing it intentionally. It's very easy to misunderstand. Ready next week could mean ready for the devs to test, or could mean like customers' hands. And so I think the last thing is just being really crystal clear, coming from product, here are the updates. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think you covered it all there.
Awesome. Tim, I have another question that's specifically addressed to you, actually, which is, Tim, what is Help Scout's process for passing on, communicating, or dealing with sales-related questions that come in via support chats and support emails? Who closes the loop? Do support team members take a first stab at it? Do they just forward all that stuff to the sales team? How does that handoff look like?
Yeah, so I think it follows similar rules. So again, we go back to the rule of if it's over an account or a potential account over a certain size, is where it would be passed to sales. And if it was lower than that, it would not. But it's not as straightforward. Like what we would not want to happen is an incoming request comes in from a trial customer 3 days in, great product question. We don't want to make that person wait for a sales rep to get off their next call to answer, right? That's not the great customer experience. So what we would do there is the support person, if they knew the answer, we call it Mo on our team, kind of has the momentum going around, what she calls yes and. She would answer yes, answer the question, give the answer, and then say, and I want to loop you into whoever your assigned AE is. They're going to be able to walk you through exactly how to set this feature up and answer any questions you have. And she would then transition that to an AE once she answered the customer, potential customer's question.
Sweet. Colin, any comments?
I actually had a question for Tim. I imagine you have some bigger customers, right? You have smaller customers, bigger customers. Do you ever get to a level where, one of your largest customers has dedicated people for support, or is it all just sort of go to the pool?
We don't have anybody yet today that is like a dedicated one-on-one support or account manager for our larger customers. But what we do have are what we call like AM watches. So for kind of certain buckets of customers, you always have somebody who's monitoring the support conversations. So if we see a larger influx from that account group or a theme of requests coming in, they can proactively reach out. And we actually split those core accounts across different people on the leadership team.
And that's on the leadership team. Is there a sales component there as well that's watching those?
We aren't actively working any of those accounts, but our support team would proactively, if any of the largest accounts wrote in and it was upgrade related, it was expansion related, or even in some cases, quite honestly, churn related, they would typically loop in the AE because, again, we always want to optimize for whoever has the most context and can provide the customer the best experience. In some cases, that is sales.
Gotcha. Cool. But at the really large ones, it's coming to senior leaders.
Yep.
Phenomenal. Do you do the same, Stelly?
No. Like we have for us, and this actually relates very, very well to the question that was a closeout specific one, which is the next one, which is where does success fit? Does a success org or team exist at close? And where does it fit? So for us, it's sales success support, right? And the difference between, so sales is very clear, right? Sales is, taking somebody that's not a customer yet and guiding them all the way to the moment where they decide to start paying us money and being a dedicated customer. Then success and support have very similar functions. The difference is really that support is mostly reactive with a little bit of proactive activity, and the success team is exactly the reverse. It's mostly proactive with a little bit of reactive kind of activity. And so we don't, like most of our customers are, or not all of our customers are SMBs. We actually like disqualify you once you're a certain size. We don't have enterprise customers. So we, from the infrastructure of the company internally, we don't have these like massive organizations that are using us that need like super dedicated account managers and a support team and anything like that level of complexity of infrastructure. So we're able to service all our customers in a very similar fashion. Now there are differences. We have some customers, our biggest customers and a small customer are very significantly different organizations still, right? Even if the biggest customer is not an enterprise customer, it's still a 200, 250 seat customer. That's a sizable chunk of money they pay us and sizable amount of significance that our product has within their company and the things that they're trying to do. But we are not yet at a point where we have such massive customers that would have dedicated teams for those.
Gotcha.
Now, the next question, again, we touched on a little bit, but I'd love to hear maybe some more 2 cents before we move on to the next one, which is handoff, right? So somebody's asking, we talked about customer journey and all this sounds so good and all teams are one team and we all love the customer and all that, but there's lots of different people, right? And so when you, especially for probably even bigger sales teams where there's a sales development rep that was your first touch point, and then there was an account executive that was your second touch point, and then there's a success manager that's your third touch point, and then there's some support manager that's your fourth touch point, and God forbid if any of these people leave and you have to replace that experience, then you go between 4 and 8 different people that you have now to deal with as a customer with that company. So the question here was like, how do you deal with handoff in general? Like the different people interact with the customer and people that the customer didn't know up until that point, and that are potentially lacking context or lacking that relationship building that happened prior. We talked a little bit about having calls where both parties are on top, but I just generally want to hear some thoughts on like smooth handoff and smooth for the customer more so than for the company, right? Well, what are some good ways to do that?
I mean, I'll take this one first, Tim, if you don't mind. Because our handoff process starts from, we basically have, you know, an inbound team and an outbound team, right? And so it goes basically, you're either outbounded to or you inbounded to us, right? You're going to have a conversation where we're not scripting the conversations, but we're sort of templatizing what we want to take away from those conversations. And then we pass that to an account exec, and then we templatize the different types of conversations that they're going to have. And then we pass all that data into Salesforce. And when I say templatize, we're not scripting things. We have certain sort of phrases and terms that we want to make sure that we nail the execution and the delivery of those. But we're not by any means saying, okay, this is how you run. This is exactly the words that you need to say for the whole 30-minute sales conversation. What we're doing is we create templates that every account exec, that every SDR, that every inbound rep uses. And those templates are mapped into fields in Salesforce. And so as you look at any opportunity in our system, and you can see the progression from, you know, every call basically, or every step has its own section. So you can actually watch the development of that opportunity, and you can see more than just, you know, BANT or MedPick or whatever. We sort of go way deeper into, you know, the different customer pains, what they're actually trying to achieve. And I think on the sales side, that's really helped us create a smooth transition from that inbound, you know, that first call you have to the second call. You're sort of building on each conversation, because just like I was talking about my first answer, the worst thing is when you have a great conversation, and then you lose that momentum because the next person in line has no idea what you're talking about. And so our support team, and Stella, you've alluded to this a couple of times, is making sure that you integrate those two systems. This is one area where we're working on improving, but right now we basically do a pull out of Salesforce of like, here's that conversation. We pass that off to the person that's taking over the account. I think that's an area where we could probably do a bit better. The support, the account strategy team, they do have access to Salesforce, so they can log in, they can see all these conversations. But I'd love to hear how Tim, how do you do this?
Yeah, so we've taken a bit of a unique approach here. So our account executives own an account for its first year. That doesn't mean you're proactively working the account for the whole year. But let me explain why we do this. So our sale is incredibly solution-based, right? Most of our largest customers are coming from a system. So we don't have to tell you about all the value of using a help desk and having a knowledge base and doing live chat, right? You're coming to us and you want to understand, why should we use Help Scout over the existing solution? So our sales conversations get really deep into the nuances of the product and process and workflow to help them understand where Help Scout could shine for them. It's unique in most cases to each scenario. So in that case, it was create a lot of friction if we tried to move that to somebody else to help with onboarding. So our account execs actually own the entire onboarding process. So not only are they selling the customer, they're working with them all the way through typically a 60-day window through implementation. Because they have all the context, and it's a much smoother and actually a more efficient process. They could do it faster than having to have a knowledge transfer. And the upside of that, and why we allow them to own the account for a full year, is all of the growth is not about the initial deal size. If we set you up, you'll typically grow, 140% your first year, right? So we want the AE to benefit from all the growth of their work. Now, in regards to the handoff, again, the AE cannot support that account for the entire 12-month window. We integrate support into our sales process very early on. So as soon as we start getting into the implementation phase, we would introduce support as a resource there, where it says anything that's context related, like it's very unique to your scenario, something we've spoken about. You should use, me as a resource, or whoever the AE is as a resource for that. Anytime you have a quick question, or you're struggling with something, or you need a fast answer, you should always go to support. They're a better resource. They're actually faster. they're just faster, right, than AE can be. So we try to pull support into the sales process as early as possible, so it doesn't exactly feel like a transition.
Dope. All right, next question. Question here is about like sharing more. So the person is saying that, you know, that they'd love to hear some more specific ways of how we make those two teams work together, like support and success. Tools, processes, anything that helps them perform better together. One thing that I'll throw out there to begin with is that I think a big difference that something that makes a big difference for us is the way that these teams have insights and access to what's going on to each other's world, right? And so one is that, you know, every communication in this that the support team is having with customers or with trial users or whoever, and any communication that the sales team is having or anybody else in the company is transparently seen in Close.io. So anybody that goes on a customer page can just see everything that happened, everything that was said. In our case, we have the calls in there, like recorded and logged, like all the communication is super transparent on a specific customer case. But even a layer above, every team, so the support and the sales team send a weekly report, which is basically just a Google Doc that updates with a few highlights, a few challenges, and very specific cases. So the support team might just highlight the one big thing that a lot of customers are complaining about, or the one big thing that's really going wrong right now because everybody's confused about this, right? It's very concrete with links to the specific customer interaction with like, the support's interpretation, but also an open question to anybody in the company how to deal with this. And similarly, the sales team will be like, here's what we're struggling with right now. Here's the objections that we are getting crushed by. Here are the things people are confused about with us. Here are the things that we're telling people that hopefully the rest of the team will deliver, but we're not that sure, right? And then here's specifically 2 highlighted customer stories of the week, 2 deals that we closed and why these people bought and what convinced them and what their use case is. And what we see is that the teams comment on these Google Docs weekly and will ask questions, right? The support team might be like, that's curious. You said that they bought because of X, Y, Z. What about that was really good? Because the support team knows we're not that strong in X, Y, Z, right? Or like, this is curious. Like, tell me more about this. And vice versa, there's communication because there's transparency in what's happening on those two teams. And similarly in other channels, like our entire support team and our sales team are both in each other's Slack channels, right? They're not super active, but they're in each other's Slack channels, right? Mm. So they have a passive eye where once a day they might look into and just see what's happening. What is team sales talking about right now? And what is team support figuring out right now? And it's easy for both teams to just involve somebody and just go at support team, having a customer that needs XYZ, will we be able to support them with those needs, right? And the support team can just interact and participate. So I think that using technology and having transparency in a way where these two teams both see what's going on and are able to participate, communicate, comment, ask questions, I think that's been a hugely helpful thing to bring these two teams together and make them work really well together.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add on top of there when it comes to what technology is also celebrating wins together, right? It's so easy for sales to want to celebrate a big win. But what often gets left out is like, hey, Jake just won, this great deal. They also had 10 support interactions during their first trial period with us. So making sure that you're celebrating the wins on both sides can go a long way.
Mm-hmm. I'll build on what Tim said. Stelly, I love that you do it as a Google Doc. We actually get together, and that's something that I'm going to think about doing for our team, because as we grow, it's going to get unwieldy to get everybody on a Zoom at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. Which, shout out to the guys in Cancun that actually, stay at the office late so they can have beers with us. But every Friday, 4:30, we have a meeting called Beers and Tears, where we do exactly that. We start off, we share, here's the tears from the week. And so the team leads go and they gather, like, here's the things that sucked. Here's the things that we struggled with. Here's the things that we need to fix. Right. And it can be anything it's sort of like an agile, here are my blockers kind of type of meeting we do once a week with the whole company. And they share, exactly that. And then we always like to end with the wins. So across all of the teams, here's what we launched. Here's a customer that closed. Here's a customer of ours that closed I think 2 weeks ago, we had a customer close $1 million deal. So like we're all, celebrating that. together. It's not just silo and these awesome things are happening over here and these awesome things are happening over here. We're all getting a chance to share. And I feel like the connection there, it's like closing the loop. It's creating a feedback loop from sales gets to see, okay, this is a customer that I brought in, a year ago. And then, I worked really hard with them to make sure that, I invested all this time with the support team. And now I'm hearing that, oh, great, these guys, this team has spent their time with us. Now they're getting tremendous value. I think little pieces like that, they create these feedback loops that just serve to reinforce that really great behavior that you want to see across all your teams.
Dope. Tim, next question to you. We're gonna now go rapid fire, right? Last 5 or so minutes. We're gonna try to answer with like as little sentences as possible, so we go through as many of these questions as possible. You're on the spot now for this. So Tim, I'm gonna summarize this question to basically, the support team is trained to answer product-related questions and troubleshoot. How do you train them to be able to manage more sales objections? Like somebody emailing and saying, this is too expensive, or I'm looking at your competitor, they do XYZ better. Like, how, do you train the support team to deal with it? Do you just tell them to pass it on?
It goes both, right? You could pass it on if it's over a certain size, or we would train you to do it. It goes in training both teams the same way. Sales training, support training, product training, both should have the same foundational training on an ongoing basis.
Sweet. Colin, for you, since you have 2 offices, like Closeout is fully remote, right? So we don't have any office, so everybody's remote. But the question here is they have a sales office and they have a support office, and they're totally different locations and cities. So the question is like, how do you deal with it when there's like real office cultures, but those offices are very far apart from each other? Any tricks, any tips? You talked about beers and tears. Anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, beers and tears, it comes down to how you build the company. I mean, I think we've been because our engineering team has always been remote. So we've been trying to be fairly remote friendly. One of the things that we do, I don't think this is specifically relevant to the question, but we have a rule that if one person is remote, then everybody's remote. And so that you don't have 10 people sitting in a conference room and then one person in a different office who's a second-class citizen in that meeting, because there's that crappy speakerphone and they're up on the TV going, what? And they're listening. Like you just can't hear all the crosstalk. So that's one thing that's totally unrelated to the question, but I feel like if you have 2 different offices, that's one thing that you really need to be paying attention to. I think the other piece is just take a note out of Stelly's book, right? Their team is fully remote and they get together twice a year, and that involves flying people in from all over the world. And I guarantee that's not cheap. So if you have 2 offices in 2 different cities within the continental United States, it's relatively inexpensive to get everybody together in the same location, at least once a year. And I think the more opportunities, we've talked about this a bunch, but, developing that empathy for the people that, that you're working alongside, finding ways to enable people to engage one-on-one, outside of just regular full-time jobs is a super key.
Sweet. Next question I'll address, since it was addressed to me. Founders, how do we build the very early stages of these 2 different teams? My basic advice there is don't do it as basic as possible. Don't overcomplicate, don't over-engineer, don't set up like all kinds of different systems when there's no person there. Start simple. Things will complicate it on their own. Don't overthink things too much. Just ask yourself, what's the right thing to do for the customer? That usually leads to good outcomes. And don't hire people for positions and to do a job that nobody has ever done, even in a part-time fashion within the company. So, if nobody's doing sales right now and everybody's just offering support, somebody on the team, everybody was selling, but somebody should start doing the type of activities that you then want to hire people to do, because you're going to lack both empathy and any kind of insight on who to hire and how to onboard these people if nobody's ever done any of this stuff. So that would be my advice on that. Next question, huge question is the question here, which is typically the product team makes all product decisions. Marketing and sales are coming up with an ideal customer profile and who to go after and all that. And support is just dealing with the bullshit at the end. But support has incredible insights on what features to build, what about the product is broken, what type of customers might be a lot more pain that they're really worth once you have to deal with them. How do you empower the support team to be really driving insights in the company and direction when it comes to product roadmap and customer niches and all that? Like, what's a good way to empower the support team to play a bigger strategic role?
Yeah, I think they deserve a seat at the table. We do quite a bit to engage the people that are supporting our customers on the front line, because we think of product, sales, marketing, and support all as sort of one piece of the same puzzle. It's all the same customer, right? It just happens to be 4 different functions that are serving them in 4 different ways. And I think if you're not engaging your customer support team, you're missing out on a huge wealth of knowledge. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, so we have very tactically, we have a liaison on support team that is part of all product meetings. And she is the one line between, I mean, we have other ways, but she's the one line back and forth. So she's sharing all learnings or providing input on anything roadmap related, but she's also bringing everything back to both support and sales of like, here's where the roadmap is, here's the timeline, here's why it's prioritized. It gives everybody the ability to voice it, but it just made it more efficient to have one person be kind of the one person that communicates that.
Awesome. Tim, Colin, thank you so much for sharing your amazing wisdom. Everybody here, every single person in this webinar was a rock star, asking incredible questions, being super engaged. So 2 thumbs up on that. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Hopefully we'll help all of us to work harder to align support and sales and deliver better outcomes for our customers. Until next time, that's it from us. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you later, everyone.